I was holding my daughter's hand in the ambulance when I got fired by text. No warning, no heart. I didn't even have time to cry. But 3 days later, their investors started calling me asking why I'd suddenly disappeared from the company. I was kneeling on the floor of the ambulance, gripping my son's hand so tightly my knuckles went white. His skin felt clammy and too still, the way only parents of allergic kids truly understand. The paramedic was shouting numbers into his radio while forcing a second dose of epinephrine into my boy's thigh. All I could hear was the siren, the rustle of oxygen tubes, and the ding of the text message that ended my life as I knew it. Effective immediately, your employment is terminated. Those 4 words glowed on my cracked screen. The world didn't slow down like people say it does in crises. It sped up, rushed at me, hit like a truck. I couldn't even process the meaning. My son Elias wasn't breathing right. His breaths were short, sharp, and too spaced apart. His lips had started turning that terrifying shade of blue. And here was my boss, my mentor, my supposed work family, firing me while my child hovered between life and death. I didn't cry. Crying would have taken energy I didn't have and time I couldn't spare. Instead, I shoved the phone into my pocket and whispered, "Stay with me, baby. Stay with me," over and over like a prayer I didn't believe in anymore. We'd been on our way home from his school field trip to the science museum. He'd eaten a cookie during snack time, the wrong cookie. He knew better. The teachers knew better. But somehow peanuts slipped through every precaution. 30 minutes later, he collapsed on the bus. 4 hours before this, I had been fine. Stressed, anxious, exhausted, but fine. I'd spent 3 months building a proposal expected to bring in nearly $60 million in social impact funding. I had been the backbone of my department at Atlas Impact Group, a startup in Seattle that preached all the hip buzzwords about empowerment, equity, and community transformation. Then the school called. Elias had ingested peanuts. He was showing signs of anaphylaxis. I grabbed my bag and sprinted to the elevator, but before the doors could close, my boss, Victor Hale, stepped in front of them. "You can't leave, Mara," he said calmly, like he wasn't asking me to choose between motherhood and survival. "Not today. My son is in anaphylactic shock," I said, pushing past him. Victor moved with me, blocking me again. "The investors flew in from Hong Kong, London, and New York. This meeting decides our future. Your future. You can't leave." "I'm leaving," I said. "Someone else can present." His face shifted, something I'd never seen before. Cold, mechanical, like he wasn't thinking about investors anymore, like he was making a decision about me. "Fine," he said. "Go." I'd thought that meant he finally understood. It didn't. It meant he'd already chosen his scapegoat. The ambulance jerked around a corner and Elias' body convulsed. The paramedic called for a crash kit. I felt the world drop out from under me. I didn't know then that Victor had already rewritten my slides, deleted my data, and planted a lie so devastating that by the time I learned the truth, it would already be too late. But that revelation came later. Right now, all I knew was this: my child might die. My job was gone. And the betrayal that had just started would end with a twist I never saw coming, one that would flip everything I believed about loyalty and trust on its head. "We're losing him," the paramedic shouted, and everything inside me shattered into silence. People always assume betrayal hits like a sudden blow, but the truth is uglier. It builds slowly, drip by drip, until one day you realize you've been drowning for years without noticing the water rising. That was my life at Atlas Impact Group. And Victor Hale, my boss, my mentor, was the one holding the hose. Before everything collapsed, I actually admired him. That's the part I still hate admitting. When I joined Atlas 6 years ago, the company was nothing but a cramped loft in Pioneer Square, and a handful of people who believed they were going to change the future of community development. I was a single mom working night shifts at a grocery store, finishing my master's degree by the grace of caffeine and panic. Victor found my graduate research on data-driven equity models and called me personally. He told me I had a mind that could reshape modern philanthropy. He said he believed in me. Back then, that meant something. For a long time, I thought Atlas saved me. The stable salary, the mission-driven work, the flexible schedule. Victor even bought Elias a birthday present one year, tiny train set, nothing expensive but thoughtful. I remember telling my sister, "He's the first boss who's ever treated me like a person." What a stupid, naive thing to say out loud. But the cracks started showing 2 years ago, after Atlas landed its first multi-million-dollar contract. Slowly, subtly, Victor changed. His office door started staying closed. He stopped asking for my input and started taking credit for work he didn't understand. New employees looked at him like he was some visionary genius. Meanwhile, I was the one doing the grunt work, running data models, interviewing community members, writing pages of analysis he never read. But I told myself it was fine, that this was how leadership worked, that I should just be grateful to have this opportunity at all. That's the problem when you claw your way out of poverty. You mistake exploitation for generosity. And Victor knew exactly how to use that. 2 months before the ambulance incident, I noticed odd inconsistencies in the quarterly impact reports. Programs we had not funded yet were listed as completed. Metrics I had not calculated were inserted into my models. I confronted Victor about it gently, still believing he was the man who once told me I was the backbone of Atlas. He brushed it off. Investors like optimism, Mara. You're too literal sometimes. Too literal. Like honesty was a personality flaw. I wanted to push harder, but Elias had just started a new school. Asthma attacks were becoming more frequent. Bills were piling up. There was never a good time to risk my job. And I didn't want to think Victor was capable of something truly unethical. But then the investors scheduled the big presentation. A global roundtable that would decide whether Atlas grew into something enormous or crumbled. I should have trusted my instincts when Victor suddenly became extra attentive. He asked for my slide deck multiple times, wanted small edits, told me he'd handle the final version. I didn't know then that he wasn't refining my work, he was rewriting it, erasing my accurate findings, replacing them with fake success stories and fabricated metrics, setting me up as the signature on a fraudulent report. The morning of the presentation, I walked into the office and felt something in the air, like everyone else had read a memo I hadn't. Whispers stopped when I passed. A few coworkers avoided eye contact. Victor, on the other hand, was too cheerful, too smooth. Then the school called. Elias wasn't breathing right. My whole world narrowed to one decision. Victor's reaction wasn't fear for my child. It wasn't even frustration. It was calculation. A moment of recognition. I was no longer useful to him. And that's where the real story begins, not with the ambulance siren, but with the years of trust he'd been shaping into a weapon. And he was about to use it against me in ways I never imagined. I spent the first night in the hospital sitting upright in a stiff plastic chair. Watching the rise and fall of Elia's chest like it was the only thing keeping my own heart beating. Every time the monitor beeped, I flinched. Every time a nurse walked in, I braced myself for the worst. Around 4 a.m., after the meds finally stabilized him, I powered on my phone. I shouldn't have. I should have slept, or cried, or prayed, anything but that. But curiosity mixed with dread, and I opened my email. The termination letter was there, official and cold as if written by a machine. No severance, no explanation. Just a line citing insubordination and dereliction of duty. There was one more attachment, a corrected investor deck, with my name plastered across the title slide. I clicked it. My stomach flipped. The deck wasn't just altered. It was unrecognizable. Fake numbers, fake outcomes, photos of buildings that didn't exist. Success stories I had never written, not projections, claims, presented as if Atlas had already changed entire neighborhoods. And the signature at the end? Mine, forged cleanly, precisely. Victor hadn't just fired me. He'd set me up as the fall person if this blew up, but that wasn't even the worst part. There was a forwarded email attached. One Victor had sent to all senior leadership the night before the presentation, after I'd left for the hospital. Subject: urgent Mara's unreliability. He'd written that I'd abandoned my responsibilities, that I'd been emotionally unstable for weeks, that he'd suspected data tampering in my models and had to correct them under pressure. My hands shook so hard I could barely swipe the screen. He didn't just kick me out, he rewrote the entire narrative of who I was. When dawn broke, I stepped out of the room to call my closest coworker, Jenna, one of the few people I trusted. She picked up on the second ring. "Holy shit, Mara, I'm so sorry," she whispered immediately. "But listen, you need to know something." I leaned against the hallway wall. "What?" "He told everyone you sabotaged the deck." Said you panicked about the numbers and left the office to avoid accountability. He made it sound like you were having a breakdown. I let out a sharp breath. And people believe him. Some do, some are scared not to, but there's more. He locked me out of the server last night. He's hiding something, I don't know what, but it's big. I closed my eyes. Bigger than falsified data? Mara investors are already asking questions. There's a rumor that the London group started verifying community sites on their own yesterday. My heart kicked. That wasn't done, not without notifying Atlas first. Investors didn't independently verify site data. It was unheard of. Why would they do that? I asked. I don't know, she said. But Victor looked panicked when he heard. Like he was expecting it but hoping it wouldn't happen so soon. Soon. That word sliced through me. Victor knew this day was coming. He'd prepared his cover story, me. Right then, standing in that hospital hallway that smelled like antiseptic and burnt coffee, something in my chest hardened. This wasn't panic. This wasn't stress. This was a line being crossed, burned, buried. Victor hadn't simply betrayed me. He'd used my son's medical emergency as a perfect window to erase me completely. The escalation wasn't accidental. It was intentional, calculated. A setup executed at the exact moment he knew I'd be unable to fight back. And for the first time in days, a thought surfaced, quiet but sharp enough to cut through fear. He thinks I'm already defeated. He had no idea what was coming. 2 days after Elias was discharged, I walked into my apartment kitchen and found an envelope wedged under my door. No return address, just my name written in a rushed, uneven scrawl. For a moment I thought it might be a sympathy card from a neighbor. Seattle people loved pretending they cared. But when I tore it open, a single USB drive slid out. No note, no explanation, just a tiny piece of metal that felt heavier than it should have. I plugged it into my laptop. One folder. Named Read This Now. Inside were spreadsheets, emails, financial transfers, and something that made my entire body go cold. Hard evidence that Victor had been altering my impact reports for nearly 3 years. Not just the last deck, not just 1 or 2 numbers. Systematically, repeatedly, strategically. He hadn't just started using me as a shield, he'd been grooming me to become his scapegoat all along. The deeper I clicked, the sicker I felt. There were time-stamped changes showing entire sections of my reports replaced with fabricated data, always after midnight, always from Victor's login. There were forwarded emails where he blamed Mara's inaccurate baseline calculations for discrepancies investors had questioned. There were meeting summaries where he told board members he was coaching me through my analytical inconsistencies. Coaching me. Coaching? The man had rewritten my work, pinned the inconsistencies on me, and called it mentorship. But the twist didn't hit until I opened the last document, a memo addressed to the executive board, written a month before everything collapsed. Subject: succession strategy, phasing out Mara Caldwell. My vision tunneled as I read. Mara has become a liability. Her tendency to question our optimistic projections poses a risk to investor confidence. Recommend planned transition out of her role by Q2, citing performance concerns and emotional strain from single parenting responsibilities. He had already begun orchestrating my removal long before the ambulance, long before the presentation, long before I even suspected something was wrong. He planned to paint me as unstable, overwhelmed, unfit. And he was going to do it quietly, until Elias' medical emergency gave him a cleaner, faster exit route. But there was one more thing. The part that hit so hard I had to sit down. Attached to the memo was a draft press release. Half-written, never sent. Atlas Impact Group is saddened to announce the departure of senior analyst Mara Caldwell following internal review of data integrity concerns. He'd been preparing a public execution of my career. And worse, the data fraud had gone far beyond fabricated metrics. There were private spreadsheets showing Atlas funds transferred to partner organizations that didn't exist. Community programs that weren't just unfinished, they were entirely fictional. This wasn't sloppy reporting. This was fraud. Big, deliberate, federal-level fraud. I finally understood why Victor panicked when investors began verifying sites. Why he looked almost relieved when I walked out of the office. Why he fired me instantly and smeared me in internal emails. If the investors uncovered the lies, and they would, he needed someone to take the fall. Someone whose credibility he'd already eroded behind the scenes. Someone with a vulnerable child, limited resources, and no power. Someone like me. My phone buzzed then. A text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have seen that." My blood froze. Before I could process it, another text came through. "We need to talk. Tonight," then a third, "or everything gets worse for your son." I stared at the screen, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't corporate strategy anymore. This was a threat, personal, calculated, and terrifying. The betrayal I thought I understood wasn't even the real one. I just uncovered the first layer. Victor was hiding something bigger, something I was never supposed to see. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on my couch with every light in the apartment turned on, Elias asleep in his room, unaware that his mother was unraveling in the next room. The texts kept replaying in my mind. Not the "we need to talk" part. The other part. "Or everything gets worse for your son." Victor had always been manipulative, but this was different. This crossed into something darker, something I never believed he was capable of. The threat wasn't explicit, but it didn't have to be. It was meant to scare me into silence. And I'll be honest, for the first hour, it worked. But fear has a strange way of turning into resolve when you're a parent. When you've watched your child's chest rise and fall through oxygen tubes, when you've sat helpless in an ambulance wondering if you'll get to hear his voice again. Somewhere between midnight and sunrise, the shaking in my hands stopped. The fear didn't go away, but it focused itself into something sharper. Not rage, not vengeance. Determination. I knew I couldn't confront Victor alone. He had money, influence, and connections that stretched far beyond the walls of Atlas Impact Group. What I had was the truth, but truth is useless without a strategy. I needed allies, so I made 3 calls. First call, Jenna. She answered whispering, like she was already expecting something bad. "I saw the text he sent you," she said before I could speak. "He's unhinged, Mara. The board is panicking. Investors are asking questions that Victor can't answer." "I need access to the server logs," I said. "All of them for the last year." There was a long pause. "That's dangerous," she whispered. "If he finds out, he already threatened my son." That silenced her. "I'll get you everything," she finally said. Second call. My friend Cashin, a cybersecurity analyst who owed me a favor after I helped him get his first big contract. He didn't ask many questions, just listened, cursed loudly, and then said, "Send me the USB. I'll find out who planted it and what else they accessed." Third call, Grace Torres, an investor who'd always treated me with respect when we worked together. She picked up sounding tired, annoyed, mid-flight or mid-deal. I could never tell. When I explained the situation, her tone shifted instantly. "Mara, listen carefully. 3 investor groups already raised concerns about Atlas's reporting. If you have proof, real proof, the entire company could collapse." "I know," I said. "But I'm not trying to burn it down, I'm trying to protect myself." "And your son," she added. I didn't respond, but she knew. "Meet me tomorrow morning," she said. "Bring everything." I spent the rest of the night organizing the evidence from the USB, categorizing altered metrics, tracing financial transfers, comparing original documents with falsified ones. And that's when I found it. The thing that changed everything. A spreadsheet buried deep inside a folder mislabeled archived contracts. It wasn't archived. It was active. And it showed a program Atlas had claimed to fund fully, $8.2 million allocated, but the receiving organization had no sign of it ever arriving. The kicker, the receiving organization didn't exist. Its EIN number wasn't real. Its address belonged to a shuttered laundromat in Tacoma. This wasn't impact fraud anymore. This was embezzlement, on a massive scale. A slow-burning dread crawled up my spine. Victor wasn't just covering up lies. He was funneling money, moving it, hiding it. And the biggest twist, every false report was tied to programs with my name on them. He had built the entire scheme inside my department's paper trail. That was the moment my planning shifted from defense to something closer to revenge, revenge wrapped in ethics, precision, and truth. Not the hot, impulsive kind. The cold kind. The kind you build piece by piece like an airtight case file. Before dawn, my strategy was clear. I wasn't going to destroy Victor. I was going to let the truth do it for me. All I had to do was pull the right thread. And the whole empire he built on lies would come crashing down. By the time morning light crept through my blinds, I had a plan, a stack of evidence, and a knot of dread in my stomach that wouldn't go away. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what came next. I showed up at the cafe Grace chose, a quiet spot in Capitol Hill where tech workers pretended to write novels. I expected her to be alone. Instead, when I stepped inside, she was sitting with two other major investors, people I'd only ever seen in boardroom meetings and formal presentations. People with influence, people Victor feared. Grace waved me over. "Sit. We need to show you something." I handed her the folder of printed documents. "There's more on the drive, but this is enough to prove." "Mara," she said gently, placing her hand over mine. "We already know." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" The man beside her, sharp suit, no nonsense, opened a binder. Inside were photos, copies of documents, internal memos, all of it related to Atlas. But they weren't from me. They weren't from my folders. They weren't from the USB cache and analyzed. They were from someone inside the company. Grace leaned in. "A whistleblower came forward 6 weeks ago." I blinked. 6 weeks? The woman on the other side nodded. "They provided enough evidence to suggest Atlas was falsifying its impact metrics. We started a quiet audit process." 6 weeks. 6 weeks before the presentation. 6 weeks before Victor fired me. 6 weeks before everything collapsed. Which meant, Victor knew, I whispered. "Oh, he knew," Grace said. "He was given a formal notice. He knew an audit was coming. He knew investors were verifying sites independently." And suddenly the pieces snapped together with brutal clarity. Victor didn't fire me because I left the presentation. He fired me because the audit was already underway, because he needed someone to take the fall before the fraud was exposed, because he knew a tidal wave was coming and he needed a shield to hide behind. And I was the perfect shield, single mom, overworked, under-resourced, replaceable. But then the second twist hit harder than the first. Grace slid a printed email across the table. "Take a look at who the whistleblower is." I scanned it. Stopped. Read it again. No, that wasn't possible. The whistleblower was someone I trusted. Someone who'd been calling me nonstop since the firing. Someone who claimed to be on my side. It was Jenna, my friend, my confidant, the person who gave me access to the server logs. The one who told me Victor looked panicked. The one who warned me things were bad. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. Grace watched me carefully. "We thought you already knew." I shook my head. "She didn't tell me. Why would she hide that?" The man beside her answered quietly. "Because the whistleblower made a deal." My throat tightened. "A deal? In exchange for giving us early evidence," he said. "She secured immunity. And a promotion." My hands went cold. A promotion. Jenna, quiet, anxious, always overlooked Jenna, had been climbing a ladder I didn't even know existed. A ladder Victor was holding steady for her while he cut mine down. It made me feel sick, because I would have helped her. I would have supported her. But she'd chosen survival, hers, not mine. Grace slid another page over. "There's something else." It was a schedule of internal policies Victor had pushed through quickly, quietly. And one stood out. Transitional Leadership Plan, Interim Director of Impact Jenna Reese. My replacement. She was supposed to step into my role the day after the investor presentation. The same presentation I never gave. The same presentation Victor rewrote without telling me. My voice cracked. She knew he was going to fire me. She didn't know how, Grace said softly. But yes, she knew. The betrayal hit harder than Victor's, because Victor lied to me professionally. Jenna lied to me personally. As I stared down at the documents, a new realization rose beneath the heartbreak, sharp, steady, cold. I wasn't just fighting Victor anymore. There were two enemies, one in front of me, one beside me. And if I wanted to survive this, if I wanted to protect Elias and clear my name, I needed a different kind of plan. One that didn't rely on trust. One that didn't involve allies. One that didn't leave room for betrayal. Because the second twist was this: Victor wasn't my only betrayer. Jenna was, too, and her betrayal was the kind you never see coming until the knife is already in your back. And I wasn't done uncovering secrets, not even close. I used to think villains had motives rooted in pain, childhood trauma, insecurity, fear of failure. Something human. Something that at least explained why they turned cruel. But the night I finally learned the truth about Victor Hale, I realized something far darker. Some people don't need a tragic reason to destroy others. Some people choose it because it benefits them, because it's easy, because it works. And Victor, he was one of those people. It happened the same night I confronted the investors with my evidence. After hours of walking them through forged reports, fake nonprofits, funneled funds, and falsified metrics, Grace pulled me aside. "There's one more thing you need to see," she said. "Something internal auditors uncovered. Something disturbing." She hesitated before sliding a folder across the table, not because she doubted me, because she regretted what she was about to put on my shoulders. Inside were transcripts from Victor's private Slack messages, recorded meetings, and a confidential memo prepared for the board. But it was the first page that stopped my breath cold. It was a psychological profile of me, written by Victor, dated a year and a half ago. The title read, "Risk Assessment, Emotional Instability and Manipulability, M. Caldwell." I felt physically ill. Below the title were bullet points that made me grip the edge of the table. Single mother with limited financial resources, vulnerable to pressure. History of anxiety following child's hospitalizations, exploitable. Desire for approval makes her compliant and unlikely to challenge decisions. High work ethic equals perfect shield for questionable data. Perfect shield. Perfect shield. He had studied me, evaluated me, not as an employee, not as a person, but as a tool. A convenient human buffer to absorb blame. The recordings were worse. In one audio clip, he told another executive, "Mara isn't a threat, she's predictable. The kind who burns herself out trying to be perfect. If the numbers ever come under scrutiny, she'll fold. She'll take the fall because she's used to carrying everything alone." Another clip. "She's exactly who we needed, hungry, grateful, desperate to prove herself. The type who won't look too closely at the big picture. And if she does, I can handle her." Handle me. Like I was a liability, a dog, a device. The room around me faded. I could hear Grace's voice, but it was muffled, like underwater. "Mara, there's more. This isn't just business malpractice. He targeted you deliberately." Targeted, deliberately. I flipped to the next document, a strategy plan. Victor wrote it in cold, clinical language. "Position Caldwell as lead analyst on all community-based projects. Her signature on reports ensures plausible deniability. If inconsistencies arise, leverage her family obligations and emotional fragility as justification for removal." My head spun. He didn't fire me in a moment of anger. He didn't panic when I left for the hospital. He had been waiting for the perfect moment, one where he could dismiss me without raising suspicion, one where people would believe I was unstable, one where he could frame it as emotional burnout from parenting responsibilities. Then came the final page. The real reason, the reason that made my skin crawl. Once removed, her replacement, Reese, will comply with adjustments needed to maintain investor confidence. Caldwell is too principled, too attentive, too moral. She cannot be trusted to lie long-term. That was it. That was the horrifying truth. It wasn't that Victor thought I was weak. It wasn't that he thought I was incompetent. It was that he knew I had principles, that I cared, that I told the truth. And for a man like Victor, the truth wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. He destroyed me because I wouldn't lie, because I couldn't. Because he needed someone unethical, someone desperate, someone willing to bend the numbers to whatever shape investors wanted. Someone like Jenna. As I stared at the last page, a cold calm washed over me. For the first time since this nightmare started, the fear was gone. I finally understood the monster I was fighting. And now that I knew the reason, the chilling, calculated, soulless reason, I knew exactly how to end this. Not with rage. Not with chaos. With precision. With truth. With the same integrity he tried to weaponize against me. What Victor didn't know then was simple. He hadn't chosen a perfect shield. He had created his own executioner. I didn't tell the investors everything that night. Not yet. Not the psychological profile. Not the recordings. Not the strategy memo labeling me emotionally manipulable. Those were weapons I planned to use later, with maximum precision. But I walked out of that cafe with one clear truth. Victor wasn't careless. He wasn't impulsive. He was methodical, calculated, predatory. And now I understood his playbook well enough to dismantle it piece by piece. The first strike came quietly. I filed a formal whistleblower report with the state attorney general, complete with the forged signatures, falsified metrics, non-existent nonprofits, and financial transfers linked to the fake laundromat organization. I attached timestamps. Server logs Jenna had unknowingly helped me gather. The audio clips, the memos, I didn't need to embellish anything. Victor had already incriminated himself in ways most criminals don't even attempt. The second strike came through Grace, who called an emergency investor meeting and invited me, not as an employee, but as an independent analyst. They recorded the entire session as I walked them through every manipulation, every fabricated metric, every optimistic projection Victor claimed investors wanted. By the time I finished, you could have heard a pin drop. Then the London investor, always the coldest in the room, said, "Pull every dollar." Effective immediately. The third strike was the one Victor never saw coming, because I didn't go to the media. Not yet. I went to the communities first, the ones Atlas lied about helping. I sat in their rec centers, their classrooms, their church basements, and showed them the books. Showed them the fake promises made in their name. Showed them exactly where their money should have gone. And something unexpected happened. They got angry. And organized. They contacted their city councils, their local news stations, their development boards, their grant committees. One pastor in Tacoma even gathered signatures from 600 residents in a single weekend. By Friday, the story was everywhere. Not because I broke it, because the community's Victor exploited demanded answers. The headlines hit like a meteor. Local impact firm INVSTIJTD, $4 multi-million fraud. PROGRAMS FUNDEDON paper, but not in reality. Single mother fired during child's medical emergency, identified as scapegoat. Victor must have realized I didn't leak it. That made it worse for him. It meant he couldn't control the narrative. Within days, the AG froze Atlas's accounts. IRS investigators requested records. The board resigned. And Victor, always so composed, so in control, lost his grip publicly in a live-streamed press conference. He blamed me, blamed Jenna, blamed the communities, blamed miscommunication, blamed the audit process. He blamed everyone but himself. But the final strike, that one I delivered personally. The AG's office asked me to meet with investigators for a formal deposition. When I walked into the conference room, Victor was already there with his attorney. He went pale the moment he saw me, but pretended not to be shaken. His lawyer began with the usual nonsense. Mara Caldwell inflated data without authorization. Mara's personal stress caused errors. Mara is retaliating for her termination. I didn't say a word, not yet. Instead, I opened the folder I'd been saving and slid the psychological profile across the table. Victor's signature sat at the bottom. His attorney stopped speaking mid-sentence. Victor's face drained of color. Next, I played a short audio clip, the one where he described me as predictable, emotionally fragile, and useful as a shield. Then I showed them the strategy plan, the one where he admitted I was too moral to be trusted with long-term deception. Silence washed over the room, thick, suffocating, undeniable. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady. Victor didn't fire me because I left a presentation. He fired me because I wouldn't lie for him. He built an entire fraud operation on top of my name. He destroyed my credibility to protect himself. But you already knew that, didn't you, Victor? You wrote it down. He didn't respond. He couldn't. His attorney leaned forward, whispering urgently. Victor slumped back in his chair like something inside him cracked. The investigators asked him one question. A simple one. He didn't answer. He requested a private consultation instead. That was the moment I knew it was over, truly over. 3 months later, Atlas Impact Group shut down permanently. Victor was indicted on multiple charges. Jenna resigned after her immunity deal became public, and every community leader refused to work with her. As for me, I didn't go back to the corporate world. I founded North Star Alliance, a coalition where community leaders, not investors, not executives, control their own projects. We built transparent, public impact dashboards so no one could ever falsify metrics again. The first program we launched was named after Elias, the Caldwell Fund, not because I wanted the attention, but because he survived something terrifying, and I wanted him to see what real integrity can build. Sometimes people ask me if destroying Victor felt good. The truth, it didn't feel good. It felt right. There's a difference. And the kicker, the line I never say out loud but always think. Victor was right about one thing: I am predictable. Predictably honest. Predictably relentless. Predictably unwilling to let a monster rewrite my story. He underestimated the wrong mother, and that was his last mistake.